Rita stood on the wooden platform as the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting everything orange and red. She was the last one left. All the other women had already been chosen, money exchanged, families satisfied. But not her. She'd been standing there for hours, watching men walk past, shake their heads, and move on to someone else. The auctioneer was getting desperate. She could hear it in his voice as he tried again. "Come now, gentlemen. Rita is a hard worker. Strong as an ox. She'll give you healthy children and never complain about the work. Strong as an ox." That's what they called women like her when they were trying to be polite. Rita knew what they really meant. She'd heard the whispers all day. Too big, too heavy. Who wants to feed someone that size? The comments cut deeper than any knife could. She kept her chin up anyway. Let them stare. Let them judge. She'd spent 28 years in this valley, and she'd learned long ago that showing weakness only made things worse. So she stood there in her worn dress, the one her mother had tried to make look nice with a borrowed ribbon, and she refused to cry. The truth was, Rita hadn't wanted to be here at all. This whole tradition, this marriage market as they called it, felt wrong to her. But her father's farm was drowning in debt. The crops had failed 2 years running, and the landowners were circling like vultures. Her 3 younger siblings needed food, clothes, school supplies. Her parents had sat her down 3 weeks ago with tears in their eyes. "We have no choice," her father had said, unable to look at her. "If we can get a good bride price for you, we can save the farm. We can keep your brother and sisters fed." Her mother had cried into her apron. "I'm so sorry, Rita. I'm so sorry." Rita had wanted to scream. She'd wanted to run. But where would she go? She had no money, no skills beyond farm work, no way to survive on her own. And if she refused, her siblings would suffer. Little Tommy was only 8. The twins, Sophia and Rose, were 12. They didn't deserve to starve because their older sister was selfish, so she'd agreed. She'd put on the dress, pinned up her hair, and let her father lead her to the town square where this degrading spectacle happened twice a year. The day had started badly and only gotten worse. The first man to approach her had circled her like she was livestock, actually lifting her arm to check her muscle tone. "Too much weight," he'd muttered. "I need someone who won't eat me out of house and home." The second man had been more direct. "I'm looking for a wife, not a barn." The third hadn't even spoken, just looked her up and down and laughed before walking away. By midday, Rita had gone numb. She'd stopped hearing the individual insults and let them blur into background noise. She'd watched younger women, thinner women, prettier women by the valley's standards get chosen one by one. She'd seen the relief on their families' faces as money changed hands. She'd wondered if any of those women felt as hollow as she did. The worst part wasn't even the rejection. It was knowing that her family was watching from the crowd, seeing their last hope of financial survival literally being passed over and dismissed. Every time a man walked away without making an offer, she could feel her father's desperation growing. As evening approached, the auctioneer's voice had taken on an edge of frustration. He'd already reduced the asking price twice. Her father had nodded his approval both times, his face gray with shame. They both knew what it meant if she went home unchosen. The debts wouldn't wait. The landowners wouldn't show mercy. Rita had just started to accept that outcome, started to imagine the disappointed faces at home and the impossible choices that would follow. When something changed in the crowd, people started murmuring, turning to look at someone approaching. Rita couldn't see who it was at first. Then the crowd parted, and a man walked through. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with a thick beard and hair that looked like it had been cut with a hunting knife. His clothes were practical, worn leather and heavy canvas, the kind of outfit someone wore when they lived far from town and cared nothing for fashion. His face was weathered, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent most of his time squinting into sun and wind. But it was his eyes that caught Rita's attention. They were steady, calm, completely unbothered by the spectacle around him. He didn't look at her the way the other men had. There was no judgment in his gaze, no disgust or amusement. He looked at her the way someone might look at a fellow traveler on a long road. The auctioneer perked up immediately. "Caleb, we haven't seen you in town for months. Are you interested in how much?" Caleb's voice was deep and quiet, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. The auctioneer named the reduced price, then quickly added, "But of course for you. We could discuss. I'll pay triple." The crowd went silent. Rita felt her heart slam against her ribs. Triple. The original asking price had been high, meant to help her family recover completely. Triple that amount was more money than her father would see in 5 years of good harvests. The auctioneer stammered. Triple, sir, that's very generous, but surely, do you accept or not? Rita's father pushed through the crowd, his face a mixture of shock and desperate hope. You're serious? You'll pay that much? Caleb pulled a leather pouch from his coat and counted out bills. Real money, not promises or credit. He handed it to Rita's father without ceremony. That covers it, I believe. Rita's father took the money with shaking hands. He looked at Rita, opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. What was there to say? They both knew he'd just sold his daughter to a stranger for enough money to save the farm and have plenty left over. Thank you seemed obscene. I'm sorry seemed inadequate. Caleb turned to Rita for the first time since arriving. He looked at her for a long moment, not examining her body or judging her worth, just looking at her face as if trying to read something there. Then he spoke, and his words were quiet enough that only she could hear them over the crowd's excited chatter. Pack what matters to you. We leave at dawn. Rita's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. Where are we going? Home. Up in the mountains. I don't even know you. Something that might have been sympathy crossed his face. I know, but you know this place and what it thinks of you. Maybe something unknown is better than something cruel. Before Rita could respond, he turned and walked away, heading toward the edge of town. The crowd swallowed him up, everyone talking at once, speculating about the strange mountain man and his inexplicable choice. Rita's mother reached the platform first, pulling her down into a fierce hug. Oh, honey. Oh, my sweet girl. Why would he do that? Rita whispered. Why would anyone pay so much for me? Her father had no answer. None of them did. All they knew was that tomorrow at dawn, Rita would leave with a man she didn't know, to a place she'd never seen, for reasons she couldn't understand. That night, Rita lay awake in her small bedroom staring at the ceiling. Her mother had helped her pack what few possessions she had. Some clothes, a hairbrush, the locket her grandmother had left her. Not much to show for 28 years of life. She kept replaying Caleb's words. Maybe something unknown is better than something cruel. He was right about one thing. This valley had been cruel to her. Every year of her life, she'd been reminded that she wasn't good enough, wasn't pretty enough, wasn't small enough to deserve respect or kindness. But the unknown terrified her. Mountain people were different, everyone said so. They lived hard lives in harsh conditions, far from the comforts of valley towns. And Caleb had paid triple the asking price. What did he expect in return for that kind of money? What if he turned out to be worse than the men who'd rejected her today? But then she remembered his eyes, calm, steady, not hungry or cruel or mocking, just looking at her like she was a person, not a problem to solve or a burden to bear. As the first light of dawn crept through her window, Rita heard a knock at the door downstairs. Her heart jumped into her throat. It was time. She picked up her small bag, took one last look at the room where she'd grown up, and went downstairs to meet whatever fate awaited her in the mountains. Caleb was waiting outside, a large pack on his back and a walking stick in his hand. He looked at her bag and nodded approvingly. Traveling light. That's good. Rita's mother hugged her again, crying openly now. Her father pressed some bread and cheese into her hands for the journey. Her siblings clung to her, not fully understanding why their sister was leaving, but knowing it had something to do with helping the family. Take care of yourself, her father said gruffly. And, thank you. Rita couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She just nodded and turned to follow Caleb, who was already heading toward the mountain trail that led away from town. As they walked through the empty morning streets, Rita looked back once. She could see her family standing in front of their house watching her go. She could see the town square where she'd stood yesterday being judged and rejected. She could see the valley spread out below, the only home she'd ever known. Then Caleb led her around a bend in the trail and it all disappeared from view. There was only the path ahead now, climbing up into the mountains, leading her toward a future she couldn't imagine. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the fear and uncertainty, Rita felt something she hadn't expected, a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Caleb was right. Maybe the unknown could be better than the familiar cruelty she was leaving behind. She took a deep breath and kept walking. The mountain trail was steeper than Rita had imagined. Within an hour of leaving town, her legs were burning and her breath came in short gasps. Caleb walked ahead of her with steady, measured steps, never seeming to tire or struggle. He didn't rush her, though. Every time she fell too far behind, he'd stop and wait without saying anything, just standing there patiently until she caught up. Rita hated feeling weak. She'd worked on the farm her whole life, doing heavy labor that would exhaust most people. But this was different. The thin mountain air made every breath feel insufficient, and the constant upward climb used muscles she didn't know she had. Around midday, Caleb stopped near a small stream. He set down his pack and pulled out some dried meat and bread. He offered half to Rita without a word. She took it gratefully, too tired to feel awkward about the silence between them. "How much further?" she finally asked. "We'll reach the cabin by nightfall if we keep steady pace," he said. Then after a moment, "You're doing well. Most valley people quit after the first 2 hours." Rita didn't know if he was being kind or just stating a fact, but the words gave her a small boost of energy. When they started walking again, she found herself watching him more carefully. Caleb moved through the wilderness like he was part of it. He knew exactly where to step on the rocky trail, which branches to duck under, where the path would be muddy or unstable. A couple times he pointed out things without explaining why. A certain type of plant, a mark on a tree, the way the clouds were forming over a distant peak. Rita got the sense he was teaching her, preparing her for something even though he barely spoke. They encountered a bird with a broken wing lying in the middle of the trail. Caleb stopped immediately, crouching down to examine it. His large, rough hands became surprisingly gentle as he carefully checked the injury. He pulled a piece of cloth from his pack, wrapped the bird securely but not too tightly, and carried it for the next hour until they reached a sheltered spot under some rocks. He placed the bird there carefully in a place that offered protection from predators but was open enough that it could leave when it healed. "Will it survive?" Rita asked. "Maybe, maybe not. But I won't be the reason it doesn't get a chance." Something about that moment stuck with Rita. This man who'd paid a fortune for her at an auction, this stranger she'd feared might be cruel or demanding, had stopped his journey to help an injured bird. It didn't match the story she'd been telling herself about what kind of person he might be. As they climbed higher, Rita noticed other small things. The pack Caleb carried was heavy. She could tell by the way it sat on his shoulders, but she saw extra blankets tied to the outside. He'd brought supplies specifically for her, and the boots he'd told her mother to have ready that morning, the ones she was wearing now, were exactly her size and already broken in so they wouldn't give her blisters. He'd planned for her comfort before they'd even met. Late afternoon brought them to a ridge where the view opened up. Rita stopped, breathless for a different reason now. She could see the valley far below, looking tiny and insignificant from this height. Above them, mountains stretched endlessly, their peaks touching the clouds. She'd lived her whole life in the shadow of these mountains but had never truly seen them before. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Caleb stood beside her, looking at the same view. "It's honest. That's what I like about it. Up here, everything is what it is. No pretending. No hiding behind pretty words." Rita thought about the valley below, about the auction and the cruel comments disguised as concern, about all the ways people had learned to be polite while breaking your spirit. She understood what he meant. As the sun started to sink lower, they rounded a final bend and Rita saw the cabin. It was bigger than she'd expected, built from solid logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. It wasn't fancy, but it looked sturdy and well-maintained. Around it, she could see evidence of careful work: a vegetable garden, a woodshed stocked with neatly split logs, a chicken coop, and a small barn. "This is home," Caleb said simply. He led her inside, and Rita looked around with curiosity. The main room had a large fireplace, a solid wooden table with chairs, and a kitchen area with a cast-iron stove. Everything was clean and organized, but there was a loneliness to the space. No decorations, no personal touches, nothing that made it feel lived in rather than just functional. Caleb set down his pack and gestured to a door on the right side of the room. "That's your room. It has a bed, a chest for your things, and a window that faces the sunrise. The door has a lock on the inside." Rita looked at him in surprise. "A lock? Until you choose otherwise, that room is your space alone. No one enters without your permission." He said it matter-of-factly, as if this was obvious, but Rita's eyes filled with unexpected tears. She'd spent the whole journey terrified of what would happen when they reached his home. She'd imagined 100 different scenarios, most of them frightening. The idea that he was giving her privacy, safety, and choice hadn't been one of them. Caleb seemed uncomfortable with her tears. He moved toward the kitchen area, giving her space. "There's a well out back for water. Outhouse is about 50 yards to the left. There's a path. I'll make something to eat." Rita went to the room he'd indicated, opening the door carefully. It was simple but clean, with a bed covered in a handmade quilt, a wooden chest at its foot, and a small table with a wash basin. But what caught her attention were the curtains, faded floral fabric that looked old but had been recently cleaned and mended. And on the small table was a photograph in a wooden frame. She picked it up carefully. It showed Caleb, looking younger and less weathered, standing with his arm around a woman. The woman was small and delicate, with a bright smile and eyes full of joy. In the photo, Caleb was smiling too, in a way Rita hadn't seen from him yet. She heard him moving around in the main room and carefully set the photograph back down. When she returned, he was slicing bread and laying out cheese and cold meat. He'd set 2 places at the table. They ate in silence for a while. Rita was starving after the long hike, and the food, though simple, was good. Finally, she worked up the courage to speak. "The woman in the photograph," she said quietly, "in my room." Caleb's hand stilled for a moment. "That's Claire. My wife." He paused, then corrected himself. "Was my wife. What happened to her?" He was quiet for so long that Rita thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice was steady but heavy with old pain. "She died 3 years ago. Childbirth, our daughter died too. They're buried on the hill behind the cabin where Claire liked to watch the sunset." "I'm so sorry." He nodded slowly. "Claire loved it up here. Everyone thought she was crazy for marrying me and moving to the mountains. She was small, delicate. Everyone said she wouldn't last a winter, but she was tougher than anyone gave her credit for." He looked at Rita directly. People judged her by the wrong standards, just like they judge you. Rita felt something shift in her understanding. "Is that why you came to the auction? You were looking for someone like her?" "No." Caleb shook his head firmly. "I wasn't looking for another Claire. Nobody could replace her. But after she died, people in town tried to match me with women they thought would be suitable for mountain life. Strong farm girls who wouldn't mind the isolation. Every single one of them left within a week. Complained the work was too hard, the winters too cold, the life too lonely." "Then why did you—" "Because they were looking for easy," he interrupted. "They wanted to marry a mountain man like it was romantic, like it would be an adventure. They didn't want to actually live this life. But you," he leaned forward slightly, "you've spent your whole life being told you're not good enough. You've survived years of people treating you like you're worth less than nothing, and you're still standing. That takes real strength." Rita had never thought of it that way. She'd always seen herself as weak for not fighting back harder, for accepting the cruelty instead of leaving. "The auction was wrong," Caleb continued. "The whole tradition is wrong. But I saw you standing there taking all those insults with your head held high, and I thought, she's stronger than any of those people know. She's survived something that would break most people. That's the kind of strength you need up here. So you bought me as what, free labor?" Rita tried to keep the bitterness out of her voice but failed. "I paid your father what he needed to save his farm and keep your siblings fed. That money means your family is safe." He met her eyes steadily. "But you're not my property, Rita. You're not my servant. I'm hoping you'll be my partner, but that's your choice to make." "Partner in what?" "In this life. This place requires 2 people to run properly. The garden, the animals, the maintenance, preparing for winter, hunting, preserving food. It's too much for one person alone. Claire and I worked together to build this place into something that could sustain us. Since she died, I've been barely managing." Rita processed this slowly. "What if I'm no good at it? What if I can't handle mountain life? Then in the spring, when the pass is clear, I'll take you to the nearest town with enough money to start fresh wherever you want to go. No obligations. No judgment. It seemed too good to be true. Why would you do that?" "Because that's what Claire would have wanted. She believed everyone deserved a chance to choose their own life." He stood up and started clearing the dishes. "For now, get some rest. Tomorrow I'll start teaching you what you need to know. The work will be hard, but I think you can handle it." That night, Rita lay in the bed in her locked room, staring at the ceiling. The photograph of Caleb and Claire sat on the table beside her, and she could see the happiness in their faces even in the dim light from the moon outside. She thought about everything Caleb had said. About strength and survival. about being judged by the wrong standards, about having a choice. For the first time in years, maybe in her entire life, Rita felt something like hope stirring in her chest. The strange, quiet man who'd paid a fortune for her at an auction wasn't the monster she'd feared. He was just lonely, trying to survive in a place he loved, offering her a chance she'd never expected to get. Outside her window, she could hear the wind moving through the pine trees and the distant sound of a stream. The mountain sounds were different from valley sounds, wilder, more honest, just like Caleb had said. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine it, learning to live in this place, growing strong in ways that had nothing to do with what she looked like, building something real with someone who saw her as a person, not as a problem to be solved or a burden to be tolerated. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. But underneath all that fear, Rita felt something she hadn't felt standing on that auction platform. She felt possibility. Tomorrow would bring challenges she couldn't imagine yet. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Rita felt safe enough to sleep deeply. The lock on her door, the room that was hers alone, the man in the next room who'd given her choice instead of demands, all of it combined to create something precious. Hope. Real, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to become something better than survival. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thought was of Claire in the photograph, smiling that bright smile. Rita hoped that someday, if she stayed, if she learned to love this mountain life, she might smile like that too. Not because she was trying to replace Claire, but because she'd finally found a place where she could be herself without apology. The mountain wind sang outside her window, and Rita slept. Rita woke to the sound of an axe splitting wood. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky outside her window in shades of pink and gold. She dressed quickly in the practical clothes Caleb had told her mother to pack: sturdy pants, a thick shirt, and boots made for work, not fashion. When she stepped outside, Caleb was already halfway through a pile of logs that needed splitting. He looked up briefly and nodded toward the cabin. "There's coffee on the stove, eggs and bread in the kitchen. Help yourself." Rita made breakfast for both of them, figuring if she was going to be his partner, she should start acting like one. When she brought his plate out to the porch, he seemed surprised but pleased. "After you eat, we'll start with the basics," he said. "Garden first. Winter's coming early this year, so we need to harvest everything that's ready and prepare the soil for next spring." The garden turned out to be bigger than Rita had realized. Rows of vegetables stretched behind the cabin, and Caleb handed her a basket and showed her what needed picking. Tomatoes, squash, beans, potatoes. She'd worked in her family's garden before, so this part felt familiar. But then came the hard work. Turning the soil, pulling out finished plants, spreading mulch for winter protection. Her back ached after an hour. After 2 hours, her hands were blistered. After 3, she was ready to collapse. Caleb worked beside her the whole time, never complaining, never stopping. But he did notice when she was struggling. "Take a break," he'd say, straightening up. "Drink some water. There's no prize for pushing until you break." By midday, Rita's whole body hurt in ways she hadn't known were possible. The farm work she'd done in the valley suddenly seemed easy by comparison. But she also felt a strange sense of satisfaction looking at the work they'd accomplished together. Over the next few days, Caleb taught her the rhythm of mountain life. How to chop wood properly so you didn't waste energy or risk injury. How to preserve food for winter, drying meat, canning vegetables, making preserves. How to tend the chickens and collect eggs. How to read the weather by watching the clouds and feeling the wind. Rita failed at most things the first time she tried them. She split wood so badly that the pieces flew in all directions, nearly hitting Caleb once. She burned a whole batch of preserves because she didn't watch the temperature carefully enough. She left the chicken coop door unlatched and spent 2 hours chasing escaped chickens through the woods. Each time she messed up, she braced herself for anger or disappointment. That's what she was used to. But Caleb just showed her the right way and let her try again. "Everyone fails when they're learning," he said after the chicken incident. "Claire once left the gate open and our goat got into the vegetable garden. I'd everything except the potatoes. We lived on potato soup for a week." The memory made him smile, just slightly. The point isn't being perfect. The point is learning. Slowly, Rita got better. Her hands developed calluses instead of blisters. Her muscles adapted to the constant physical work. She started to anticipate what needed doing without being told. More importantly, she started to feel capable in a way she never had before. One morning, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Rita successfully split an entire pile of wood on her own. The pieces fell clean and even, exactly as they should. She stood there, breathing hard, looking at what she'd accomplished. Caleb walked over, examined her work, and nodded. "Good. That's good work, Rita." The praise was simple, almost casual, but it meant everything to her. She'd spent her whole life being told what she couldn't do, what she wasn't good enough for. Being told she'd done something well, that her work mattered and was valued, filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the physical exertion. As autumn deepened, the work intensified. They had to prepare for winter, and Caleb was serious about making sure they had everything they'd need. He taught Rita how to hunt small game, how to set snares, how to identify edible plants and useful herbs. He showed her where the emergency supplies were stored, how to start a fire in severe conditions, what to do if someone got injured when they were too far from town for help. "Knowledge is what keeps you alive up here," he explained. "It's not about being tough or brave. It's about knowing what to do when things go wrong, because things will go wrong." Late one evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Rita had started to cherish these quiet moments, the peaceful silence that didn't feel uncomfortable anymore. "Can I ask you something?" Rita said. Caleb nodded. "Why didn't those other women stay, the ones people tried to match you with after Claire died?" He thought about it for a while. They wanted the idea of this life, the romance of living in the mountains with a mysterious woodsman. But they didn't want the reality, the hard work, the isolation, the sacrifice. When they realized it wasn't going to be like the stories they'd imagined, they left. "Do you think I'll leave?" He looked at her carefully. "Do you want to?" Rita surprised herself with how quickly she answered. "No, not yet anyway. I want to see if I can really do this, if I can be the person you think I might be." "You're already that person," Caleb said. "You just needed a place where you could prove it to yourself." A few days later, an early snowstorm hit. Caleb had predicted it. He'd been watching the clouds and checking the animals' behavior for signs. They'd spent the previous day securing everything, bringing in extra firewood, checking that all the shutters were tight and the roof was sound. But even with the preparation, the storm was fierce. Wind howled around the cabin, driving snow sideways. The temperature dropped so fast that the water in the bucket by the door froze solid. On the second day of the storm, they woke to find the cabin's heating system partially failed. The fire in the main fireplace was fine, but the pipe system that distributed heat to the rest of the cabin had frozen somewhere. "We need to fix it," Caleb said, already pulling on his heaviest coat. "If we don't, the whole system could burst and we'll have no heat at all." Rita looked at the snow still falling heavily outside. "In this weather? Especially in this weather. It'll only get worse if we wait." They bundled up in every layer they owned and headed outside. The wind cut through Rita's clothes like knives. The snow was already knee-deep and still falling. They had to feel their way along the cabin wall to where Caleb thought the problem was. Finding the frozen section required climbing onto the roof, which meant Rita had to face something she'd been terrified of her entire life. She was scared of heights, always had been. Even standing on a chair to reach high shelves made her nervous. But up here, with the wind threatening to knock her off and the roof slippery with snow, Rita had to climb up to help Caleb. He couldn't do it alone. He needed someone to hold the ladder steady, pass him tools, and help with the repair. Rita's hands shook as she climbed. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. But she kept going, one step at a time, because this wasn't about being brave. This was about survival, about doing what needed to be done. From the roof, she could see the storm stretching endlessly in all directions. The world was nothing but white and gray, wild and merciless. For a moment, Rita was paralyzed by fear. Then she heard Caleb's calm voice. "You're doing fine. Just keep breathing, one task at a time." They worked together in the freezing wind, thawing the frozen pipe section with hot water they'd carried up in insulated containers, insulating the exposed area better, checking the whole system. It took 2 hours, and by the time they finished, Rita couldn't feel her fingers or toes. But they'd done it. Together, they'd solved the problem and kept the cabin safe. Back inside, warming up by the fire and drinking hot coffee, Rita realized something important. She'd just done something she never would have believed she was capable of. She'd faced a genuine physical danger, conquered a lifelong fear, and completed a task that required real skill and strength. "You did well up there," Caleb said, wrapping his own cold hands around his coffee mug. Most people would have frozen or panicked. "I was terrified," Rita admitted. "Being scared and doing it anyway, that's courage, not the absence of fear." The storm lasted 3 more days. Trapped inside together, Rita and Caleb talked more than they had before. He told her about growing up in a different mountain range, learning wilderness skills from his grandfather, about meeting Claire in a town market and knowing immediately she was the one, about building this cabin with her, planning for the family they'd hoped to have. Rita told him about her childhood, about being the fat kid who was always picked last, about learning to make herself small and quiet to avoid attention, about dreams she'd had once of maybe becoming a teacher or opening a small bookshop before she'd learned to think of herself as someone who didn't deserve dreams. "Why don't you deserve dreams?" Caleb asked, genuinely puzzled. Rita didn't have a good answer. It had just always seemed obvious that someone like her should be grateful for whatever scraps of kindness came her way, not expect more. "That's wrong," Caleb said firmly. "Everyone deserves the chance to build the life they want. Size, shape, background, none of that matters up here. What matters is what you're willing to work for." When the storm finally cleared, they emerged to find the world transformed. Snow covered everything in a thick blanket, making familiar landmarks unrecognizable. But the cabin had held firm, warm, and secure. Rita had helped make sure of that. Over the next few weeks, Rita settled into mountain life more completely. She started taking initiative, seeing what needed doing, and doing it without being asked. She experimented with cooking, using the preserved foods and dried herbs to create meals that were simple but satisfying. She even started fixing things around the cabin that she noticed needed attention. A loose board here, a wobbly chair there. One evening, Iris showed up at the cabin. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a long braid and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything. She lived on a neighboring mountain about 2 hours hike away. Heard Caleb finally found someone willing to put up with him, she said to Rita with a grin, completely ignoring Caleb's protest that he wasn't that bad. Iris stayed for dinner and told Rita her own story. She'd left the valley 20 years ago after her husband died, and his family tried to force her to marry his brother. She'd walked into the mountains with nothing but a pack on her back and had been living here ever since. "Best decision I ever made," Iris said. "Down there I was just somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, somebody's burden. Up here I'm just me, that's enough." Before she left, Iris pulled Rita aside. "You're fitting in well. Better than most. Caleb's a good man, but he's been lonely too long. Don't let him push you away if he gets scared of caring again." Rita thought about that after Iris left. She'd noticed Caleb keeping a certain distance, never getting too personal, always maintaining a boundary between them. She'd thought it was because he still loved Claire, which was true. But maybe it was also because he was afraid of losing someone again. That night, as they sat by the fire, Rita made a decision. "I want to stay, not just until spring. I want to make this work long-term." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. I've never felt as strong or as capable as I do here. I've never felt as much like myself. Whatever happens, I want to see this through." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Relief, hope, maybe fear, all mixed together. "Then we'll need to make this official, not like the auction. A real partnership with terms we both agree to." "What kind of terms?" "Equal say in decisions, fair distribution of work, mutual respect and honesty. And time. We both need time to see if this can become more than just a practical arrangement." Rita understood what he was saying. They were building something together, but neither of them knew yet exactly what it would become. That was okay. They had time. As winter deepened and the snow piled higher around the cabin, Rita found herself truly happy for the first time in her life. The work was hard, the life was demanding, but she was good at it. She was valued. She mattered. And when she looked in the mirror now, She saw someone different from the woman who'd stood on that auction platform. This woman was strong, capable, confident. This woman knew what she was worth, and it had nothing to do with her size or shape. It had everything to do with the life she was building with her own 2 hands. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And it felt amazing. Rita was feeding the chickens on a cold morning when she heard voices coming up the trail. Caleb heard them too. He straightened from where he'd been chopping wood, his body going tense in a way Rita had never seen before. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. 5 men emerged from the tree line. Rita's stomach dropped when she recognized them. Her father was in front, along with his brother and 3 men from the valley, neighbors who'd always looked down on her family. They were all armed with walking sticks that could easily become weapons. "Rita," her father called out. "Come down here, girl. We're taking you home." Rita's legs felt weak, but she forced herself to walk forward and stand beside Caleb, not behind him. "What are you doing here?" Her uncle stepped forward, his face red with anger or cold. Rita couldn't tell which. "Your marriage wasn't done properly. No ceremony, no witnesses, no proper contract. That means it's not valid." "The money was valid enough," Caleb said, his voice steady but hard. "We're returning your money," Rita's father said, pulling out a bag that clinked with coins. "Every bit of it. So you've got no claim on her. She's coming back with us." Rita felt her heart pounding. "I don't want to go back." "You don't get a choice," her uncle snapped. "You're not married, so you're still your father's responsibility. We're taking you home where you belong." "Where I belong?" Rita's voice came out stronger than she expected. "I belonged on an auction block, being sold like livestock because you needed money?" Her father flinched. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." Rita moved forward, her fear transforming into anger she'd been holding in for years. "You put me on display and let men examine me like I was a horse they might buy. You let them insult me, reject me, laugh at me. And you stood there and watched because you needed the money more than you needed my dignity." "We had no choice," her father said weakly. "There's always a choice. You chose to participate in that degrading tradition instead of finding another way. And now you want to take me back so you can do it again? So you can pocket Caleb's money and auction me off to whoever will take me this time?" The silence that followed was heavy. One of the valley men shifted uncomfortably. They all knew she was right. Her uncle tried a different approach. "Look at you, Rita, living in the wilderness like an animal. This isn't a proper life for a woman. You need to come home, find a real husband, have a real marriage." "I'm happier here than I ever was in the valley," Rita said firmly. "I've learned to do things I never imagined I could do. I'm strong here. I matter here. Why would I give that up to go back to a place that made me feel worthless?" "Because it's proper," her uncle insisted. "Because this arrangement isn't legal or moral. You're living in sin with a man who bought you." "He didn't buy me," Rita shot back. "He paid off my father's debts so my siblings wouldn't starve. There's a difference, and I'm not living in sin. I have my own room with a lock on the door. I'm his partner, not his property." Her father looked uncomfortable now. "Rita, please, we can work this out. Come home and we'll find you a proper match, someone from the valley who what? Who'll treat me the way you all treated me? Who'll remind me every day that I'm not good enough, not pretty enough, not thin enough to deserve respect?" Rita shook her head. "I'm done with that. I'm done with all of you deciding what my life should be." Caleb spoke up then, his voice calm but carrying an edge of warning. "You heard her. She's staying. You can keep your money. I don't want it back. The debt is settled. Rita is free to choose and she's chosen." "She's not free to choose," her uncle argued. "She's a woman alone with a man. That's not proper. If you're not married, she needs to come back with us. Then marry us." Everyone turned to look at Caleb in surprise. He looked at Rita, and she saw both question and certainty in his eyes. "If the problem is that we're not properly married, then let's fix that right now. Rita, will you marry me? Not because of the auction, not because of money or obligation. Will you be my wife, my true, A partner because that's what we both choose? Rita's heart was racing. This wasn't how she'd imagined this moment, if she'd imagined it at all. But looking at Caleb, thinking about the life they'd been building together, the answer was clear. Yes, she said. I will. Her father looked stricken. Rita, you don't have to do this. Come home and think about it properly. I am thinking about it properly. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking about what I want, not what everyone else thinks I should want. She turned to face her father directly. You sold me because you needed money. I understand why, the farm, the debts, my siblings. I even forgive you for it. But I won't let you take away the one good thing that came from that horrible day. Iris chose that moment to appear from the trail behind the valley men, making them jump. She must have heard the commotion and come to investigate. What's all this noise about? You're scaring the wildlife. This doesn't concern you, Iris, Rita's uncle said dismissively. Rita's my friend. That makes it my concern. Iris looked around at the gathering. Let me guess. You want to drag her back to the valley because this situation doesn't fit your narrow rules about what's proper. Never mind what Rita wants. Never mind that she's thriving here. She's living in sin, the uncle repeated stubbornly. So marry them right now and solve the problem, Iris said impatiently. Unless this isn't really about morality and is actually about something else. Like maybe wanting that money for yourselves? The uncomfortable silence that followed told Rita everything she needed to know. They'd come up here with some excuse about propriety, but the real reason was financial. Her father's farm might be saved, but her uncle and the other men saw a chance to get a piece of that money for themselves. You know what? Rita said, her voice cold now. I'll make this simple. Caleb, let's go to town and get married properly. Legal papers, official witnesses, everything by the book. Then there'll be no question about whether this is legitimate. The nearest town with a justice of the peace is a 2-day journey. One of the valley men pointed out. Then we'll make the journey, Rita said. But first all of you need to leave our property. Our property? Her uncle scoffed. Listen to her talking like she owned something. Girl, you're nothing but... Careful, Caleb interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. Think very carefully about how you finish that sentence. The uncle closed his mouth, but his expression remained hostile. Iris crossed her arms. I'll go with them to town. Serve as a witness. Make sure everything's done proper and legal so you can't come back with more complaints. Rita felt a rush of gratitude toward this woman who barely knew her, but was standing up for her anyway. Thank you, Iris. Her father made one last attempt. Rita, please, just come home and talk to us. Your mother misses you. Your siblings ask about you every day. Rita's anger softened slightly. I miss them too. But I'm not coming back to stay. If Mother wants to visit, she's welcome here any time. The twins and Tommy too, but I'm not returning to the valley to live. What about your family obligations? Another valley man asked. Your duty to your parents? I fulfilled my duty when I let myself be auctioned off to save the farm, Rita said firmly. I don't owe anyone anything more than that. Now I'm living my own life. The men looked at each other, clearly unsure what to do. They'd come expecting to find Rita miserable and eager to leave or to bully Caleb into giving her back. They hadn't expected to find her confident, happy, and absolutely certain of her choice. Finally, her father nodded slowly. If this is really what you want, it is. Then I suppose there's nothing more to say. He looked at Caleb. You treat her right, you hear me? She might have forgiven me for the auction, but I haven't forgiven myself. The least you can do is make sure it wasn't all for nothing. I will, Caleb promised. The men started to leave, but Rita's father paused and looked back. Your mother wanted me to give you this. He pulled a small wrapped bundle from his coat. She said you'd understand. After they were gone, Rita unwrapped the bundle. Inside was the family Bible with all the births and deaths recorded inside the cover. There was also a letter from her mother, and a small bag of seeds from their garden at home. Rita's hands shook as she read the letter. Her mother wrote about how proud she was, how she'd known Rita was stronger than anyone gave her credit for. She wrote about the twins starting to ask questions about the auction tradition, and how Rita's stand was making people in the valley think differently. She ended by saying that she loved Rita and would come visit in the spring once the passes cleared. She understands, Rita whispered, tears streaming down her face. She actually understands. Caleb put his arm around her shoulders, and for the first time Rita leaned into his embrace. They stood there for a moment, just breathing, letting the tension of the confrontation drain away. Did you mean it? Rita asked. About getting married properly. Did you mean it when you said yes? I did. I do. Rita looked up at him. Not because they said we should. Because I want to. Because you've shown me what real partnership looks like, and I want that. With you? Caleb smiled, really smiled, for the first time since Claire's death. Then let's do it right. We'll go to town, get the papers, have witnesses. Make it official in every way that matters. Iris, who'd been tactfully examining the garden during this private moment, spoke up. I'll go pack supplies for the journey. We should leave at dawn tomorrow. The weather's going to turn soon. That night, Rita lay in her room that would soon become their room if she chose, thinking about everything that had happened. She'd stood up to her father, to the men from the valley, to all the expectations and judgments that had weighed her down her entire life. And it had felt incredible. She'd found her voice, her strength, her worth, not because anyone gave it to her, but because she'd discovered it within herself. The mountain hadn't changed her. It had just given her the space and freedom to become who she'd always had the potential to be. Tomorrow they'd start the journey to town. In a few days she'd officially become Caleb's wife. But the truth was she'd already become his partner in all the ways that mattered. The legal ceremony would just be confirming what they'd already built together. Rita touched the locket her grandmother had left her, the one she'd brought with her from the valley. Inside was a tiny photo of her grandmother as a young woman, looking strong and determined. Rita had always thought she'd never measure up to her grandmother's strength. Now she realized she'd inherited that strength all along. She just needed the right circumstances to let it grow. She fell asleep thinking about the future, not with fear or uncertainty, but with genuine excitement. Whatever came next, she knew she could handle it. She wasn't the woman who'd stood on that auction platform anymore. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth and wouldn't let anyone make her forget it again. And tomorrow, she'd marry the man who'd seen that strength in her before she'd seen it in herself. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That made all the difference. The journey to town took 3 days instead of 2 because of an early snowstorm that forced them to take shelter in a cave for half a day. But Rita didn't mind. Walking beside Caleb with Iris trailing behind them, sharing stories and laughter, she felt more free than she ever had. The town was small but bustling, built where 3 mountain valleys met. It was full of mountain people, tough, weathered, practical folks who measured worth by character and capability, not appearance. Several people recognized Caleb and greeted him warmly, and their friendly curiosity about Rita felt completely different from the valley's judgment. They found the justice of the peace. A woman named Helen, who'd been officiating mountain marriages for 30 years. She looked at Rita and Caleb with sharp, assessing eyes. "You both here by choice?" she asked bluntly. "No coercion, no pressure?" "Completely by choice," Rita answered firmly. "Good, I won't marry anyone who's being forced." Helen pulled out the necessary papers. "I'll need witnesses." Iris stepped forward immediately. "I'll witness, but we need 2, Helen said. A voice came from the doorway. "I'll be the second witness." Rita turned to see a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, with nervous eyes and a bruise fading on her cheek. Behind her stood an older couple who looked like they might be her parents, their expressions protective. "Lucia?" Rita breathed in shock. "What are you doing here?" Her younger sister rushed forward and hugged her. "I ran away. After you left, after you stood up to Father and the others, I realized I didn't have to wait for them to auction me off too. So I took some supplies and walked into the mountains. These kind people found me half frozen and brought me to their home." She gestured to the couple behind her. The man nodded. "Name's Ben, this is my wife Carol. We heard what you did at the valley standing up to those men. When we found your sister on the mountain trail, she told us she was looking for you." "I want what you have," Lucia said, her voice shaking but determined. "I want to choose my own life. I want to be strong like you." Rita felt tears welling up. "Does Father know where you are?" "I left him a letter. Told him I was following your example. Told him the twins were watching, learning that women don't have to accept being treated as property." Lucia grabbed Rita's hands. "You changed something, Rita. By standing up, by choosing yourself, you showed all of us that we could do the same." Helen cleared her throat. "This is all very touching, but can we get back to the wedding? Some of us have other appointments today." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Helen asked them both to state their intentions clearly. that they were entering this marriage as equal partners with mutual respect and genuine choice. Caleb's answers were steady and sure. Rita's voice shook slightly, but not from doubt. From joy. When Helen declared them married, Caleb kissed Rita gently, carefully, as if she were something precious. It was their first real kiss, and it felt like a promise of all the good things ahead. Afterward, they sat in a small restaurant with Lucia, Iris, and Ben and Carol. Lucia explained how she'd spent the past month working for Ben and Carol, helping with their small trading business. They'd offered to teach her the trade, give her a real skill she could use to support herself. "But I want to learn what you learned," Lucia said to Rita. "I want to be strong enough to survive in the mountains. I want to know I can take care of myself." Rita looked at Caleb, who nodded. "You can stay with us through the winter," Rita offered. "Learn the skills you need. In the spring, you can decide what you want to do. Stay on the mountain, work with Ben and Carol, or find your own path." Lucia's face lit up. "Really? You'd teach me?" "Of course. That's what family does." Over dinner, Ben mentioned something that made Rita's heart race. "There are others, you know, women who've left the valley or other places like it. They're scattered across the mountains trying to survive on their own or in small groups. Some are doing well. Others are struggling. They could use someone to help organize them, share resources, teach skills." An idea sparked in Rita's mind. What if we created a network? A way for women to find support, learn from each other, maybe even build a community? Carol leaned forward, interested. "You'd need a central location, somewhere safe where people could come for help or training." "We have land," Caleb said slowly. "More than we use. There's a meadow about half a mile from our cabin. We could build another structure there, maybe even several. Create a place where women can come to learn mountain skills, get back on their feet, figure out their next steps." Iris grinned. "I've been doing something similar on my mountain, but smaller scale. If we combined resources, shared knowledge, we could help a lot more people." Rita felt something huge and important taking shape. It wouldn't just be charity. We'd teach practical skills. Hunting, building, preserving food, everything needed to survive independently. Women would learn to be self-sufficient. Some might want to stay on the mountain permanently, Ben added. Others might just need a safe place to transition to something else. But either way, they'd have choices. That night, back in the room they'd rented at the local boarding house, Rita and Caleb talked until late about the possibilities. They were married now, officially and completely, but instead of this being an ending, it felt like a beginning of something even bigger. "Are you sure about this?" Caleb asked. "Building a refuge means our quiet life won't be quiet anymore. There will be people coming and going, demands on our time and resources." "I'm sure," Rita said. "I can't forget what it felt like standing on that auction platform, feeling worthless and alone. If we can help even one woman avoid that feeling, it's worth it." Caleb pulled her close. "Then we'll do it together, just like everything else." They returned to the cabin with Lucia in tow and immediately started planning. Through the rest of that winter, Caleb and Iris taught both Rita and Lucia advanced survival skills. Rita found that teaching came naturally to her. She understood what it felt like to doubt yourself, to be afraid of failure, and she knew how to encourage others past those fears. Lucia thrived in the mountain environment. She was younger and learned even faster than Rita had, soaking up every skill like a sponge. But more importantly, she was discovering her own strength, her own worth. Word spread through the mountains about what they were planning. By spring, when the snow melted and the passes cleared, women started arriving. Some came alone, exhausted and scared. Others came in small groups, supporting each other. Each had a different story, but they all shared one thing. They were tired of being judged, controlled, or limited by societies that saw them as less than fully human. Rita and Caleb, with Iris's help, built 3 small cabins in the meadow. They created a communal space for teaching and gathering. They developed a system where newcomers would learn basic survival skills first, then could choose to specialize in whatever interested them most. Woodworking, hunting, preserving food, first aid, even basic education for those who'd never been taught to read and write properly. Rita became the heart of the operation. She understood what these women were feeling because she'd felt it herself. She knew how to push someone past their comfort zone without breaking their spirit. She celebrated every small victory and treated every failure as a learning opportunity. Caleb handled the practical side, building, maintaining equipment, teaching technical skills. But Rita noticed how he'd changed too. He smiled more. He seemed lighter, more at peace. Having a purpose beyond just surviving, having a home full of life again had helped heal something in him. One warm spring day, Rita's mother arrived. She came walking up the trail with the twins, now 13, and asking a million questions about everything they saw. Little Tommy, now 9, was fascinated by the chickens and the carpentry tools. Rita's mother cried when she saw the changes in Rita, the confidence, the strength, the genuine happiness radiating from her. "I almost didn't recognize you," she said. "You've become so—" "Myself," Rita finished. "I've become myself." Her mother met the other women who'd found refuge on the mountain. She saw them learning, growing, supporting each other. She saw the community Rita and Caleb had built, based on respect and mutual support rather than judgment and control. Before she left, Rita's mother pulled her aside. "Your father is ashamed of what happened at the auction. He doesn't know how to say it, but he is. The valley is changing, slowly. The younger people are questioning traditions. Some families have refused to participate in the marriage market anymore. What you did, standing up, choosing yourself, it started something." "Good," Rita said. "It needed to start somewhere." That summer, Rita discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mix of emotions. Joy, certainly, but also fear, remembering what had happened to Claire. Caleb was terrified too. She could see it in his eyes. But Iris, who had some midwife training, was there to help. So was a doctor from town who'd heard about their refuge and offered to provide medical support. And Rita herself was strong, healthy, prepared. When their daughter was born on a clear October evening, Caleb held her with tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered. They named her Hope because that's what she represented. Hope for a better future. Hope that the cycles of judgment and limitation could be broken. Hope that the next generation would grow up knowing their worth from the beginning. As Rita held her daughter, looking at the life she'd built, she thought back to that day on the auction platform. The woman she'd been then could never have imagined this. A husband who loved and respected her. A community of strong women supporting each other. A purpose that gave meaning to every day. A daughter who would grow up free from the limitations Rita had faced. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked softly. "About how I'm glad that mountain man took my hand that day," Rita said. "About how he saw something in me I didn't see in myself. About how sometimes the worst moments lead to the best things." Lucia, who'd stayed on the mountain and become Rita's closest friend and co-teacher, peeked in to see the baby. She'd grown into a confident young woman. Nothing like the scared girl who'd run away from the valley. "She's beautiful, Rita. She's going to grow up strong," Rita said. "She'll never doubt her worth. She'll never stand on an auction platform or let anyone make her feel less than she is." "None of the children here will," Lucia agreed. "That's what we're building, a place where people can become who they're meant to be." Over the next few years, the refuge grew. More cabins were built. More women came, learned, and either stayed or moved on to build their own lives elsewhere. Some returned to their original homes armed with new skills and confidence. Others made new homes on the mountain or in sympathetic towns. Rita's twins, a boy and a girl, joined Hope when they were 2 years old. The children grew up surrounded by strong, capable women and men who treated everyone with equal respect. They learned to judge people by character and capability, not by appearance or tradition. The valley continued to change too. The marriage market still existed, but participation had dropped dramatically. Families found other ways to solve financial problems. Young people, inspired by Rita's example, demanded more say in their own futures. It wasn't a revolution, but it was evolution. And that was enough. One evening, 5 years after that fateful auction, Rita stood on the ridge overlooking the valley. She could see it all spread out below. Her old home, the town square, the farms and fields she'd known her whole childhood. But it all looked so small from up here. Caleb came to stand beside her, Hope riding on his shoulders while the twins played nearby. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, "leaving all that behind?" Rita thought about it carefully. "I regret that it had to happen the way it did. I regret the auction, the humiliation, the pain. But leaving? No. Never. I didn't leave anything behind. I found everything I needed up here." She turned to look at their home, the main cabin, the teaching spaces, the gardens, the community they'd built. She could see women working together, laughing together, supporting each other. She could see Lucia teaching a new arrival how to split wood. She could see Iris leading a group on a foraging expedition. "I was sold for being too big," Rita said softly. "They thought my size made me worthless, but up here, my strength made me valuable. My determination made me capable. My compassion made me a leader." She looked at Caleb, at the love and respect in his eyes. "You took my hand and said I was the one you'd been waiting for. But the truth is, I was waiting for this version of myself. I just needed someone to believe I could find her." "You would have found her eventually," Caleb said. "I just happened to be there when you were ready." Maybe that was true. Maybe Rita would have found her strength somewhere else, somehow. But she was grateful it had happened here, with this man in this place that had taught her what she was really made of. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Rita felt perfectly content. She'd gone from being judged by all the wrong standards to building a community based on all the right ones. She'd gone from feeling worthless to knowing her true value. She'd gone from being sold on an auction block to choosing her own destiny. And in the process, she'd helped dozens of other women do the same. Hope tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, can we go see the new puppies?" Rita smiled and took her daughter's hand. "Of course, sweetheart." As they walked back toward home, surrounded by family and community, Rita realized something profound. The mountain man hadn't saved her that day at the auction. He'd given her the opportunity to save herself. And in doing so, she'd learned to help others save themselves too. That was the real story. Not about being rescued, but about discovering that she'd had the strength to rescue herself all along. She just needed the space and support to let that strength grow. And now she was creating that space for others, breaking the cycle that had tried to break her, building a future where women like her wouldn't have to stand on auction platforms to be valued. The mountain wind whispered through the pine trees, carrying the sound of laughter and voices from the refuge. Rita breathed it in deeply, feeling grateful for every step that had brought her here. She'd been told she was too big for love, too big for value, too big for dreams. But she'd learned the truth. She wasn't too big. The valley's vision had been too small. And here on this mountain, with these people, building this life, she'd finally found a place vast enough for all she could be. And she was teaching others to find that vastness too. One woman at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. The cycle was broken. The future was bright. And Rita, once rejected and dismissed, now stood at the center of it all. Not because a man had chosen her, but because she'd chosen herself. That made all the difference.